Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing well. I'm coming on tonight with a little model. It's the stages of awakening, the three main levels of awareness, going from fully asleep to increasing awareness, semi-awake, and then increasingly aware, consciously aware. And put together this little chart just to divvy up what goes into which section. And so when we're starting out, we're driving on autopilot and we're in blissful ignorance. So completely, unaware of what's going on and actually quite content there. Not, not feeling any urge to learn about what's happening in the world. Perhaps just busy with life, with everyday ongoings. And for many people, being in that place is actually, you know, they're taking care of their families, they're working. Um, there's nothing necessarily bad about being in that state other than not seeing kind of what's going on in the world and how that's going to impact them in, you know, not so much long term anymore, pretty short term. So, um, the blissful ignorance can only last for so long. And usually there's some sort of, you know, event or emergency situation that wakes people up out of that state. In that state, driving on autopilot, it's the conditioned state. And the conditioned state is, just whatever we've been conditioned with in childhood programming, everything to do with the education we received, the culture we were in, how we were raised, those sort of values or lack of values we were raised with, and anything else, that we encountered as events in our childhood usually places kind of imposes this sort of neural pathway of least resistance, creating our conditioned state. And so when we're driving on autopilot, we're just in this conditioned state. We haven't really awoken from it. We're just sort of in it and living it out. And in that state, there's a lack of depth of knowledge, right? Because there's no drive to actually like research anything or look at anything outside of our own echo chamber. And so we kind of just, you know, um, lack any awareness, lack any knowledge about anything in depth. We might hear little things here and there. It's like kind of driving on autopilot is just looking at headlines, going by and not really, perhaps reading a few articles, but not really going into any deep study with anything. And this is what we call following the crowd, and the trends blindly. It's just sort of not wanting to stand out. There's like usually that state of fear that keeps people in the status quo, and not really wanting to step outside of that due to, fear of either the imposter syndrome or feeling, like they might be ostracized uh, if they step outside and, fear of change of friend groups and, just overall general change in life that could happen by stepping out of uh, the crowd and the trends. And so, um, we kind of see Hollywood crumbling. Uh, that's been a big, there's like all these different sort of hubs, if you will, that have been guiding the trends. And all of those are sort of, crumbling right now. So people are more likely to step out of this and start doing their own research and becoming more aware. So in the state of driving on autopilots, people are simply adapting to what's happening in society, no matter how unhealthy it is, instead of going and trying to fix problems because they're in a state of, powerlessness. It becomes just, an adaptation program where they just continuously trying to adapt to what's being thrown at them in society. And then, that breeds kind of like these abusive relationship with nature, because society is definitely going in a direction that is promoting less and less of a connection with nature and working with nature, to more of an artificial kind of lifestyle. And so mm, there's like, they're kind of connected. And so this goes really deep. I could do like pretty much a video on each of these, going in depth. And I'm actually calling out, I'd love to have someone who is interested in coming on and just discussing this in detail with someone else, and possibly rearranging these and sort of putting them in order, priority of importance from top to bottom. But right now I just sort of put everything in there. So if you're interested, it's only serious inquiries only, then let me know. And if you're already working on this stuff, that would be a good match for whoever wants to co-create on this further. So, if you're adapting to a sick society and you're developing more and more of an abusive relationship with nature, you're living in disconnection. So if you're in disconnection with nature, you're disconnected to yourself. And then, in this state, right, where you're kind of like fully asleep, there's just like all this accepting due to the conditioning. It's like this accepting of false history. So that's one of the big things that, people, once they go through into these other stages, they realize, wow, everything that we've been told about history isn't all true, right? And there's many different versions and many different factions writing the story. Often the victors write the stories, but digging back is part of this, going into the knowledge. So accepting, you're just sort of accepting false history in this state, unaware of any institutionalized corruption around you. I often sort of see this, from this very kind of maternal perspective. Good people see good in the world. So a lot of people just are unaware of any systemic corruption due to being a good person, right? And if you're kind of like, have well intentions and you're trying to live a life that is, aligned to, just great things, right? And you have your values in order, uh, with your family and your work, and you're kind of in this little insulated bubble. You might not see this bigger picture, and you might not even question, because you're living your life in alignment. So you might not even question that corruption could be so institutionalized and so systemic. So that falls into this category. And then usually there's kind of this living in confusion and soul loss, because all these things stacked up end up being stacked up against you. And things become very confusing as these kind of veils thin and more transparency comes to the forefront. People are then able to, get little bits and pieces of information that really go against their belief system and really go against what they know to be happening in the world, right? What they believe to be happening. And so this creates like a lot of confusion. And it's often on the subconscious level, right? They're just kind of keeping status quo. And so they feel the confusion, but on this very deep level, this soul loss, and we can put kind of like this like depression in there, where it's just people are numbing themselves, right? They don't realize, but they're in a self-harming state, and they're just trying to numb out what wants to be seen. And so it slowly starts to build up, right? And they're just saturated in mainstream media, saturated in the collective, again, going back to like just the trends. And so moving out of the autopilot into increasing awareness is a jump that usually takes place with some sort of event. It could be just like the timing, specific experiences that people have that just really wake them up. And often, unfortunately, it's like when they have, there's a lot of chaos in life and there's things that happening, tragedy and loss and all that. People sort of like they start feeling more, right? And they start opening up, they start truly looking at what's around them. And that's when they can begin to question and they start listening to differing opinions. They start moving out of their echo chamber, and then they start, researching. They start doing the research themselves. They don't just like, blindly kind of believe whatever they're being told, or they're just not following things. They're really starting to just question everything themselves and wanting to know for themselves, right? So there's more and more time put into researching different subjects, rather than just taking in information. In this receptive mode, it becomes a more active mode, and people stop just, allowing that receptive mode to give them the answers by, um, just allowing that information to come in without it being filtered. So the researching really is like starting to filter that information and starting to have this like growing desire within the self to want to really truly know the truth of anything, right? Anything and everything. It's just this desire to know the truth. And after people start researching, they usually come into this like cognitive dissonance, which, people hear about all the time, where you have like these two conflicting, you have your old belief system that is based on the conditioned state, and then you have new information that is captured that really goes up against your current state, and potentially what you've been believing for many, many years, or even since you're born, or whatever, since you can remember. And that creates a cognitive dissonance. And so, it's the fear, not wanting to accept what it is that you're uncovering, um, feeling the loss and devastation of discovering that new information, and realizing that maybe you've been wrong about a lot of things, or whatever it is you're researching, and then having to push through to then accept um, the information that you've uncovered, because you are using your own faculties, your own thinking, logical thinking, reasoning, your intuition, and all of that combined, um, you know, allows you to uncover information that you then are forced to accept, because you understand it to be more accurate than the information that you've had previously. And so that brings people into this healing crisis. And usually, they can call it the dark night of the soul, but it's really, this is why there's an epidemic of people on antidepressant medication, because you know a lot of people just stop here, right? They're like, okay, the cognitive dissonance is just too much, like they don't, and then they want to turn back. And so instead of the healing crisis being this potentially beautiful thing, it could stay in depression and fear for a really long time. uh and then sometimes go back to this, this numbing, where it's like, oh, I'm just gonna go numb myself with whatever, you know eh, all the things that we have out there to entertain us, um, in an addictive way, to kind of, move us away from actually facing what it is that we, have come to understand within ourselves. But if you push through this phase, which everyone should, there's a space that opens up, and it's, we realize that we have an awareness, we have of choice, and we have, personal will, and we could take action with the new information that we've gathered. And this is usually when, people start having, they start conversing with nature more because they're on their own internal journey. uh, they've stopped just trusting being in that receptive mode and trusting whatever was thrown at them through societal outlets, and they go inwards. And when you go inwards, you're more likely to start really, wanting to spend more time in nature, more than before, to ground your energy, because this healing thing, this healing crisis, depression, all that, you're gonna have to go out and you're gonna have to, go connect with nature, because nature intrinsically, has everything to help us move through that process. And so there's a conversing with nature that happens, and we start reconnecting with what is called like the organic grid, kind of away from this artificial, these artificial memes and algorithms, and we start really conversing with this natural flow, um, these natural frequencies. And we also begin to acknowledge, yeah, actually history wasn't exactly as we were told. And so there's just this acknowledgement, that happens. And so we become more open to continue learning and to really start, having that debate within ourselves, and, comparing different information, and not just taking things at face value. And then, that's when learning about global corruption happens. If you're someone that's never looked into it and you're still in this category here, driving on autopilot, the people over here seem crazy, because when you first start learning about the corruption, a lot of people just go bananas. They're like, oh my gosh, it's kind of devastating naturally. And coming into that information, produces more cognitive dissonance. And so there's a lot of internal work that needs to be done to see things for what they are, without it stopping you from living a healthy life, and from staying grounded, and from, you know, ensuring that every day you continue to take care of yourself, and you don't go into any like weird states where you're just, become a martyr to a cause, and you're not taking care of yourself, because your life won't last that long if you're doing that. You really have to stay grounded, chop wood, carry water, and then enlightenment, and then go back. And so, this could take many, many years, just kind of coming into all this information and really beginning to, not just push everything that you hear about, corruption aside. Um, and so once that process takes place, there's no longer this just absolute trust in authority, right? And this external power, everything, you begin to question everything, and you see that, yeah, there's a lot of good in society. There's a lot of good in the world. There's probably more good than there is bad. But you become more discerning about that. And it builds this kind of resistance to outsourcing your power. And it builds up this desire to become more sovereign and really make decisions from this deeper internal place that began, with when you began to question, and that led to all these different steps. It started building this core within you that was, um, you know, a strong core that was reliable, right? And that allowed you to really begin to trust yourself, right? Begin to trust in the internal authority, because you're questioning, you're not just taking things for granted. So, if something crosses your path, it's like, okay, I'm going to go check that out. And I'm not just going to believe whatever I'm told first glance. It might be true, it might be not be true, but let me just go and research a bit more, right? So there's a sort of skepticism. It's like, okay, it's no longer just like porte ouverte, open doors. It's like, no, I'm going to constantly question all of this stuff, and using my reasoning skills, the person begins to become better and better at seeing the bigger picture. And so there's more of an inner authority that is built in that process. And this phase of increasing awareness usually propels a spiritual awakening. And what I mean by that is it can happen in many forms for different people. It does not have to do with religion, um, but it does have to do with recognition of this kind of higher divine intelligence at play. So the higher intelligence in this bracket here of autopilot is usually um, just offloaded to the authoritative, the people in position in authority, right, in society, the institutions and all that. And when you come into this space, that's no longer offloaded to these institutions. It really becomes this understanding that there's all these layers that are even greater. There's a divine intelligence that is real and that is not, that is like, it supersedes, what we see in the world as organized intelligence. And that's when, people dive into the soul searching during this whole process, and they start to, look for who they truly are, as a person, as an individual, as a human being. Like, what is it to be a human being on this planet? When you're in this bracket, you're just like, oh, you're born, you go to, your parents bring you up, they give you certain belief systems, you go to school, and, school is basically a vehicle to produce a certain workforce, right? So everything's geared towards, getting people to take certain jobs, certain positions in society, and have certain belief systems. And so when you're here and after you've gone through all these different layers, you kind of want to know who you are beyond this, right? Beyond the conditioning, beyond everything that you were taught in school. It's like you start to have a desire to gain the real information, the real knowledge on who you are as a soul. And so often there's like an integration of past lives, there's ancestral healing, any recognition of like, well, now that I've overcome a lot of my childhood conditioning, why was that conditioning present to begin with? It could be societal, but it could be something that's within the family line, right? And so then we move beyond, we want to do the healing work to recognize what was present and why, and then to also take actions that counterbalance that energy, right? To bring things back into harmony so that those things that were in place that, impose the conditioning upon you can no longer be passed down either to your children or to the people around you, the people you have in your life. And so there's a lot of self-care. People realize that over here in driving on autopilot, there was all this confusion, harming, numbing. They weren't aware of it, but that's basically what they were in. And so there's this like real desire that starts building up because there's a self-respect, there's a self-understanding, there's tapping into the core, you're tapping into your core, and then you really want to care for that and nurture that, right? So there's a true self-care that comes online, where you're not just wanting to like, every day come home and like throw back, X amount of drinks to forget. It's like you go beyond that and you're like, okay, how can I really take care of myself given everything that I've uncovered, and maintain balance and stay in harmony, and not become the monster that you end up wanting to fight in the world, because there's a lot that you're going to uncover here. There's a lot of like hidden monsters out there, and the real true work at this stage, I think, is to not become the monster you're fighting. And that's where a lot of people do go wrong. So this process is another, this could, I don't know how long this takes, is so individual. I mean, it's going to take the time that it takes for each person. And the bridges here that, bring someone from driving on autopilot to increasing awareness to consciously aware, going to be very different events, but they're all like kind of this 100th monkey kind of tipping point within that person's navigational system, where there's just like all of a sudden, enough information to bring them over and to expand their awareness and their consciousness. And then it just sort of all opens up from there. And so once you move past increasingly aware, semi-awake, move into increasingly aware and consciously awake, um, this process never ends. And there's also, people cycle back many times through this, but it's never at the level that it was at. Like the spiral always moves up. But once you get to this state, you're pretty much accepting what has been uncovered. You're not in that cognitive dissonance anymore. There's like a true acceptance and an embracing of, a new life in a sense and a new awareness. And that's when usually when people reach this stage, they do have a genuine, true care to do something for humanity, to care for because they care for the future of humanity. And they realize, once you realize, if you realize and you don't do anything, you become complicit, right? So once you realize there's a certain responsibility, and if you've managed to not become the monster that you're fighting and you've gotten to this place, you actually do care, right? And it's a care that goes beyond everything, any payoffs, that you could receive on Earth. Like it truly is about wanting to maintain the integrity of the human, right? Because again, there's like depending who it is that's listening to this, there's a lot that you have to go through. But once you do, learn about certain things, I mean, you care for the future of humanity. Um, and so we'll get to, there's informed action is basically what this all boils down to. But you start caring for the future of humanity. So you're no longer thinking of yourself or just your family, although you cannot stop taking care of yourself or your family. You have to even double down on that. But then you can also include this larger scope. And you start doing everything that you're doing, you start harmonizing that with the natural rhythms. Actually caring about, how much time you're spending on all, like giving your energy to all these different things, right? Because there's so many things out there that we could be giving our time to. And if you're at this stage, you're really going to start spending more time harmonizing with the natural rhythms. Um, and the self-care is going to promote like, wanting to eat properly, wanting to sleep enough, right? Because usually people that are in this stage here, they're gonna be sleeping really poorly, right? Because this cognitive dissonance, the healing crisis, everything, their sleep times are so erratic. And then finally when you get to this stage and it's, you can start harmonizing with nature again and start going to bed earlier and sleeping properly and you're taking care of yourself. And this also leads to being able to harness, the energies that are happening in nature. It's not only about harnessing opportunities here, people are only harnessing opportunities in the world that are very transactional. But once you get here, you're harnessing opportunities that are coming in on this natural, from the natural rhythms. And then there's a greater sense of interconnectivity. You realize that everything you do in this world actually counts, right? And everything is basically connected. So, no one's actually isolated, right? You realize we're all kind of all in this together. And there's a whole bunch of like really deep esoteric stuff that happens too. But this particular presentation isn't about that stuff, but you hit a place of interconnectivity where you really come to that understanding. And that's what promotes this kind of true, genuine care as well, because you realize if I truly care about myself and my family, then, I'm going to truly care about humanity, this larger things going on beyond my little world, because there is an interconnectivity and one affects the other and there's no way around that. And there's also a desire to know the true history, and this is like, it goes from here to here where that awareness comes in, but then here it's more of this ongoing research. It's like this ongoing unraveling of the mystery and like, oh wow, and uncovering more and more. And it's just this desire, this, openness to what is being uncovered. Communing with higher force, again, here there's like a, communion with institutions. Uh, Here there's an accepting, there's more of a seeking. There's an accepting that, what we were communing with in term like as a society, in terms of like, our connection to something higher was always being filtered through whether it be dogmatic religions or, you know, even if there's good, there's obviously a tremendous amount of great people that go to churches and stuff like that. But, you hit this level where you're like, okay, they're just the middleman, right, for the true connection. And so you start communing with the higher force itself. And then, the structure, routine, and values really start to take form, right, based on this process. Like you're no longer here. So there's this really kind of like consciously aware, like, how do I want to structure my life, right? What do I want my routines to look like? Because they're based on my values, right? So there's this whole reconfiguring, like a recalibration happens here, and then there's a reconfiguring that happens here to restructure our lifestyles based on all of this knowledge, right? And this energy and everything that's coming in from moving through these three stages. And then we come to like embodiment. We start really embodying our soul's path, not, the person that we were conditioned and who were told to be in the world, and, the schools that, were catering to a workforce and wanted to, it's like really about this like greater embodiment. And it doesn't mean that, um, I'm not saying that all the jobs in society are wrong. Like that's not true. It's chop wood, carry water. So like we need, I think everybody should have menial work that they participate in. That's just a contribution to keeping things going and, running society. And I really value everybody in the general workforce, and including myself. Like I do work on that level. And it's really important to, continue to do that chop wood, carry water. But then there's also this deeper kind of incentive that comes in play once you realize, and then you realize, oh, there's actually a deeper path and there's a deeper soul purpose and soul mission. And then usually people will combine both, right? They'll have work that they do, that they offer, and they might, it might reorient itself. It might not be 9 to 5. They might become a contract worker, and then it will give them more time. And then they can start embodying, and focusing on their unique skills and path in terms of what they're truly bringing forth into the world as an energy that transcends job titles, right? And it's like we all have our specific type of energy that is it's basically it's like it's our DNA, but it's like our soul imprint. And that energy needs to be, that is our true soul purpose, right? It's the essence of who we are. And so, harnessing that and then really like, focusing on that and developing that allows us to be kind of walking in our path more. And so it becomes part of like this embodiment of day to day, where everything that we're doing, everything that we're saying when we're talking and we're moving through life, we are on, we're on our path and we're doing that work. And it's not work that you get paid for, but that's what it is to be on your soul's path, right? That's the true work. Um, but again, like I said, we can't negate chop wood, carry water, right? To get anything done and to continue, maintaining like a healthy kind of functioning society where we're all working together, to continue living on this planet, we need to continue to, provide general labor and skill sets like being an electrician, carpenter, plumber, people that work, on buildings, construction workers, everyone out there that's contributing to the building of society um, has a lot of value and will always have value, even if the old society crumbles. Like we'll still need people that know how to do things, with their hands, people that can think and can do things in this world and use the natural resources available to us to create, what's around us and to keep on like, innovating, but in the right direction, right? With the right people behind those projects. So that being said, we do start to focus on this work, um, this job, this mission that we have that's greater than all of that, and that can be embodied and expressed in our every action. And it, boils down to the our values and stuff like that, but it goes deeper. It's really a soul essence energy that comes out. And that's when we really start tapping into these conscious relationships because, you can't really have a relationship, between two people that's conscious if, you haven't gone through these different stages because there's so much that still needs to be uncovered. So a lot of, the tumultuous relationships happen in these two previous, categories because there's just it's like a growing experience. There's not enough that is known, but once there's enough, once two people really are walking their path and actually, trusting in themselves and doing the work, doing the inner work, really spending time just researching things and not taking things at face value and, having gone through all this, which is huge. Usually the people are completely different by the time they get here from when they started. They can have a conscious relationship with someone. Um, and, um, and then that leads to this kind of bigger kind of multiplication of souls coming together and then these contracts aligning to a greater vision, right? And then that's when you have groups of people that are conscious coming together and aligning their skills, the work that is not paid and the work that is paid. And then there's this really concentrated form of informed action. There's really this like high concentration of informed action that could take place that can really have, greater results. It really has like a bigger impact in the world um, than someone who's doing it just individually. But as I always say, no matter what we do, that interconnectivity, like everything we do matters. Every thought we have matters. This is this is like the enormity of the game, even if no one's looking, right? It's like we're basically doing this whole process like for our the continuation of our soul's essence, right? Through all these cycles and all these lifetimes. And once you realize that, you realize like the importance of it all. And so, yeah, coming into these stages, this is sort of we're coming into these later stages of this process on a collective level. I brought forward a model with my friend a few videos back, and we talked about like some of the inner processes that people can go through. This is really like a collective process that people are going through. So I'm showing you like it's an inner process, but it's also a collective process that's been happening um, at an increasing at an increasing speed. And so there's a lot of change that is going to continue to really start multiplying and the intensity it's the Tao. It's like it's intense, but it's not like once you get to this stage you're kind of like you're flowing with it, you're you're constantly on the surfboard riding the waves and moving with the energy, right? And it's like if the energy is moving this way, then you're counterbalancing that way. And you never kind of get stuck. Here, you can kind of get stuck here for a while. Um, and this is the hardest stage to get out of. I know tons of people still stuck in this stage. Uh, and is it a individual soul's choice, like are they making decisions from a higher level? And this is, like when you look at someone's astrological chart, for example, and all their planets are in the first like four houses, are they just meant to, chop wood and carry water, that's it, and not really look at the bigger picture, or not really go out there and, they're just meant to tend to the garden and not the war. Um, you know, I'm not the judge of that, but I do know that there is a process taking place where people are going through this and it's happening on a collective level. And I know many people going through this. Uh, so I wanted to bring it forward and share it with everybody who's tuning in. And I'd love to, well, if you're interested in booking a session with me, you can go to inspiringplayfulevolutions.com. Yeah, so probably it would be under Ascension 101 Warrior Shaman Services. This is what, I'm looking at when people are like which category they're falling into, what stage they're at, and then going into the more esoteric stuff. But there's also just this as a map that people can use. But if you want to book a session with me directly, you can go there. And I also am offering services that in support of a leader. I've been doing a lot of work assisting people to kind of move through that individuation process once they get here, and kind of just, being able to really bring forth their essence and how they want to bring that forth into the world, everything to do with like, branding and business development and all that. I also offer services there. And of course, I do the astrology to help people become aware of who they are. Because once they come out of here, people are totally lost and confused. And they're like, who the heck am I? People don't know who they are because they've been so shrouded in these conditioned states that they really want to try to, they want to just try different things, and using the ancient systems that we've been given with the natural world, using the planets, we can really tap into like these core essences and these energies that are a part of us. And it's a tool that we can use to self-reflect. And so I really like going through that process with everybody as well. And it helps us come into a greater understanding of who we are, but also just like sort of, an awareness, a greater awareness of like the positive aspects of self, the negative aspects of self, and like, the internal and external enemies kind of play a role together, and overcoming that, and then, like I said in the last video, mapping out the mind is a really good way to start moving into self-gnosis. But I'll leave it at that. And if anyone wants to discuss this, I'd really love to have a discussion with someone on this, and for them to even share their story of, how that was for them, or just observation of how this is playing out around them in society, how they see it. If you're already working on this, especially for people that are already working on this, send me an email, 21stcenturyweaver@gmail.com. All right. Take care, everybody. Talk soon.